Today's unit involves how to change from a wandering generality to a meaningful specific. When I was a young boy, I heard a rather fascinating story. The story was about this guy whose wife sent him downtown to buy a ham. He got home with the ham and she said, "Why, honey, you didn't have them cut the end off." And he said, "Well, you didn't tell me to." She said, "I thought you knew we always cut the end of the ham off." He said, "Why?" She said, "I always cut the end of the ham off because my mama always cut the end of the ham off." He said, "Well, Mama's back in the kitchen. Let's go ask her." Went back to the kitchen and said, "Mama, why do you always cut the end of the ham off?" She said, "I always cut the end of the ham off because my mama always cut the end of the ham off." Well, this guy said, "We're going to solve this three-generation mystery right now." So they got on the phone, called long distance, and said, "Grandma, why do you always cut the end of the ham off?" She said, "I always cut the end of the ham off because my roaster was too small." Now, you see, Grandma really had a reason. But the truth is, most people do not have legitimate reasons for a lot of the things that they do. In this unit, we're going to carefully look at why you must have your goals and then how you set those goals. Because most people, unfortunately, do go through life as that wandering generality. 97% of the people on this earth do not really have an organized goals program. Now, that's not to say they do not have some individual goals, because certainly they do. But they do not have a total and complete program itself which enables them to win in every area of life. Now, why is it that 97% of the people just do not have that goals program? Well, the first reason literally is fear. Now, fear, as you well know, is spelled F-E-A-R. That forms an acrostic for false evidence appearing real. But if it appears real, as a practical matter, then it is real. For example, I could come into your city, I don't care where you live in this world, and rob your bank with nothing but a handkerchief. All I'd have to do is put that handkerchief over my face, put my finger in my pocket, and stick it at the teller and say, "Give me your money." Now, the evidence would be false, but that fear would be real, and so they would literally give me the money. Now, they'd probably shoot me before I got out of the bank, but I would have the money. Several years ago, a young Cuban hijacked a plane to Cuba with a bar of soap. That's all he had. He put the soap in a box. He said to the captain of the aircraft, "This is a bomb, let's go to Cuba." They went to Cuba. The evidence was false, but it appeared real, and consequently, they acted accordingly. Now, tomorrow morning, I get on a plane, as I do an awful lot of the mornings, and I'll be headed to Dallas, Texas. Now, I recognize the fact that when I get aboard that plane, there's a certain amount of danger involved. As you know, some planes do come down an awful lot faster than they go up. There's a certain amount of danger for that plane. But let me tell you something fascinating. There's even more danger for that plane if it stays on the ground. Did you realize that an airplane will literally rust out sitting on the runway faster than it will wear out flying in the air? And that's what airplanes are built for. You see, there's a certain danger in setting goals, but there's an even greater danger if you do not set those goals. Many years ago, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a brilliant writer, a very famous jurist, an inventor, an unusual man, put it this way: the great loss in our society is not the waste of our natural resources, though that is great. He said the great loss to society is the waste of our human resources, simply because we do not recognize our own ability and then aim that ability in a specific direction. You see, man and nature are 180 degrees apart. We use up nature's natural resources by using them up. We use up man's natural resources by not using them at all. Yes, there's a certain amount of risk in setting goals, but there's even more risk in not setting them. The risk comes from the fact that truthfully you might not reach your goal, and then where are you going to be? You might be a little embarrassed about it, but let me say it again. The risk is infinitely greater if you do not set them, because you will be unable to use the incredible ability which you have. Yes, the first reason 97% of the people on this earth have no organized goals program is because of fear. Now, the second reason most people do not have goals is they have never really been sold. Now, that's my job. In this unit today, I'm flat gonna sell you on why you got to have those goals. Now, I didn't say I was going to try to, didn't say I wanted to, didn't say I hoped to, didn't say I planned to. I flat said I am going to sell you on why you've got to have your goals. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do such a good job on selling you on having your goals program put together that before you go to bed tonight, you will have already taken some of the steps. I'll even put it stronger than that. If you don't take some of these steps towards setting those goals, you might as well not go to bed tonight as far as sleep is concerned, because you are not even going to be able to go to sleep. Let me say it again. You might as well not even go to bed. You are not going to be able to go to sleep. Now, the basic problem is many times, regardless of where you live, an individual is working on the job. And here's where the wandering generality comes in. They're working on the job, but they get to thinking, you know, I really ought to be spending more time with my family. And then when they're spending time with their family, they get to saying, you know, I really ought to be out there working for my family. And so when they're out there working for their family, their mind is back home. And when they're back home, their mind is back out there in the field. Then they tell everybody, well, I don't ever have time to do anything. No wonder. You're always traveling. You see, there are a lot of people who go to work tomorrow because that's what they did yesterday. But if that's the only reason for going to work tomorrow, then you're not going to be as good tomorrow as you were yesterday, because now you're 2 days older and no closer to the goals which you do not have. You cannot make it as a wandering generality. Oh, you can survive. Anybody who can get out of a telephone booth without written directions on the side can survive. But I'm not talking about survival. I'm talking about winning, and I'm talking about winning big. A number of years ago, to emphasize the wandering generality aspect, Jean-Henri Fabre, the great French naturalist, did a series of experiments with some processionary caterpillars, so named because they follow each other in a procession. He lined them around a flower pot until they formed a never-ending circle. And they started going round and round and round. In the center of the flower pot was some pine needles, which is one of the foods of the processionary caterpillar. 24 hours they went round and round, then 48 hours, then 72 hours. On and on they went. For 7 full days and 7 full nights, they went round and round until they literally dropped dead from starvation and exhaustion. With an abundance of their favorite food 6 inches away, they had starved to death because they confused activity with accomplishment. In your organization, I'll absolutely guarantee it, if you've got a dozen people in your organization, you're going to have at least one person there who is forever busy. I mean, they go here, they go there, they do this, they do that. They're into this, they're into that. And when they get there every day, their desk is piled high. And when they leave every day, the desk is still piled high. And the number of completed tasks which they have accomplished is very minimal. They are wandering generalities. Now let me tell you something, folks. Lack of time is not the difficulty. You know, you hear people talking about, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. The most successful human being on earth does not have one more minute than the most unsuccessful human being has. It is not lack of time that's the problem. It is the lack of direction. Years ago, the great merchant J.C. Penney put it this way: you give me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll give you a person who will make history. But you give me a person without those goals, and I will show you a stock clerk. You got to have goals. Can you imagine the chairman of the board for a major corporation like, let's say, General Motors, and somebody says to him, they ask the question, how'd you get to be the chairman of the board for General Motors? And he says, well, I just showed up for work, and they started promoting me, and first thing you know, here I am, chairman of the board. Would you believe that if somebody said that when Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to scale Mount Everest, when he climbed down off that mountain, and somebody came to him and said, Sir Edmund, how'd you climb the tallest mountain in the whole world? Do you really think, he said, well, I was just out walking around. Incredible. And yet there's so many people who think they can make it just by showing up for work and doing the best they can. Well, I'm in favor of both of those. But the best you can includes preparation and planning and direction. Probably the most amazing direction or example I could use, and incidentally, I want to emphasize this, goals work personally, they work for families, they work for companies, and in this example, I will demonstrate that they work for nations. Japan in 1950 was absolutely devastated. They had the highest percentage of their young men whom they had lost in war than any nation in the last 200 years. Their cities had been burned out. Their economy was in an absolute shambles. Now they called a sales meeting. Now I hasten to add that they didn't identify it as a sales meeting, but that's actually what it was. Sales meeting, marketing strategy, you name it. They called the government leaders, the leaders of industry, the leaders in the educational society. They got them all together and they laid out a plan. What can we as a nation do to unify us, to put us together and accomplish an objective that will restore national pride and bring economic prosperity to our land? They finally decided that in the 50s their goal would be to become the #1 nation in the world in the production of textiles. They reached their goal. In 1960, they got together another sales meeting, and they said, what's our goal this decade? And they decided on the impossible dream. They said, let's become the #1 nation in the world in the production of steel. Now, why is this the impossible dream? Very simple. Japan has no natural resources. They do not have the coal or the petroleum or the iron ore. They were going to have to haul the natural resources, the raw materials, from thousands of miles away into their land. Build those modern steel mills, manufacture a top-grade steel, ship it thousands of miles back, and sell it at a competitive price. Absolutely an impossible dream. But they did not look at what they did not have, which was the natural resources. They looked at what they did have, a willingness to work, a creative society, a nation that was pulling together towards a worthwhile objective. I'm here to tell you they reached their goal. 1970, they had another meeting. They said, in this decade, let's set the goal. And that goal, pure and simply, is we want to become, in this decade, the #1 nation in the world in the production of automobiles. They missed it. 1 year. That's all. In 1980, they set another goal. They said, in this decade, let's become #1 in the world in the production of electronics and computers. Now, I don't need to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, what happened in the 80s. It's absolutely fascinating. Goals absolutely work. You got to have them. In 1953, the graduates of Yale University were studied and analyzed. And they asked the questions about goals. And here's what they discovered. They discovered that only 3% of the seniors at Yale University had actually taken the necessary steps as far as setting those goals are concerned. Namely, they had identified what they wanted and had written them down. Now, to go along with that, they had listed the benefits. Now, let me emphasize something very important. The most significant part of setting a goal is to identify the benefits. You know, a lot of times an individual might have a goal, and that goal might be, well, I'm going to lose 35 pounds. And then you know what they talk about? Oh, I'm going to have to give up this and give up that and give up the other. I'm going to have to quit this and quit that. I'm going to have to surrender, sacrifice. And you can almost see them go through the halo adjusting process. Poor little me. They have a series of pity parties when they start setting their goals. They think of the price they've got to pay instead of the benefits which are coming their way. Now, for salespeople and marketing people, let me give you a fact of life. If all you talked about was price when you're trying to make a sale, I can guarantee you your sales would have a dramatic decline. What we emphasize are the benefits. The most important step in the goal-setting program is to identify those benefits. What is in it for me? Then the third thing that these seniors at Yale did, the 3%, they identified the obstacles. James Baldwin was absolutely right when he said, confronting a problem does not always bring a solution. But until you confront the problem, there can be no solution. The reality is something stands between you and your goal. If that were not true, you would already be there. You've got to spell it out. What are the obstacles? That's what the 3% did. And then the fourth step is you've got to identify what you need to know in order to get there. There's some missing information that you got to have. What is it that I need to know in order to get there? And then the fifth thing that they did, they identified the people, the groups, and the organizations they needed to work with in order to get there. If you're going to accomplish anything of any significance, it requires other people working with you. As a simple example, the giant Belgian horse on its own can pull 8,000 pounds. If you hook him up with another giant Belgian horse, together they can pull 18,000 pounds. But if you send them to training school and teach them to pull in harmony, then the team can pull in excess of 25,000 pounds. Working together, teamwork. Who are the groups, the people, the organizations I need to work with? And then obviously the next step has got to be a specific game plan, a plan of action, if you will. Can you imagine two coaches on opposite teams, whether they're coaching soccer or football or whatever, and here they're playing for the world's championship? And the day before the game, they call the team together and say, well, now, you know, we got a pretty tough opponent tomorrow. We better figure out what we are going to do. And, of course, we kind of smile at that and say, that's insane. I agree with you. They organize, they plan, they develop a plan of action for a game. I'm talking to you about a plan for life, a balanced plan, so that you win in every area of life. Now, 3% of these Yale seniors did that, and then they had taken the seventh step, too. They had established the date when they expected to be there. If you want to be the chairman of the board, if you want to win at home, if you want to win personally, if you want to win financially, if you want to have all of the winning aspect, it really takes a goals program. Now, interestingly enough, 10% of those graduating seniors from Yale University had taken about 5 of the steps, but the overwhelming majority, outside of knowing they wanted to be a doctor or a professor or an attorney, they really had no solid goals program. 20 years later, they did a study in the 2 areas which they could measure, namely career and financial. And the 3% who had taken all of the steps had literally accomplished more than the other 97% combined. It's been said often, people don't plan to fail, but they do fail to plan. I bet that's not the first time anybody who will ever view this unit has ever heard that. It's old, but let me tell you why it's old. It's old because it's true. If it weren't true, it wouldn't be old, it'd be dead. I mean, it would have long outlived its usefulness. You absolutely must have those goals. Now, for many people in this world of ours, the name Howard Hill will have no significance. He was raised over in Alabama. Howard Hill was an archer. He was a good one. He won 286 consecutive archery tournaments. As a matter of fact, he was never beaten in competition. It finally reached the point where he retired because the best bowmen in the world would not compete because they did not want to compete for second place. He killed a bull elephant with a bow and arrow, a Bengal tiger with a bow and arrow, a Cape buffalo with a bow and arrow. He killed an 18-foot shark under 15 feet of water. Or was it a 15-foot shark under 18 feet of water? It was one. All I know, it was a big one, and he was way down there. When I was a youngster, I've seen newsreels of Howard Hill where from 50 feet he would literally split the bullseye. I mean, perfectly in the center. Then he would take his next arrow and split the first one. A remarkable demonstration of skill. Now, I've never professionally shot the bow and arrow, but I am an instructor extraordinary. That just means I'm good, real good. As a matter of fact, I'm so good as an instructor that I could spend 20 minutes with you personally, and regardless of what part of the world you live in, provided your eyesight is good and your health is good, at the end of 20 minutes, I would have you hitting the bullseye more consistently than Howard Hill could have hit it the best day he ever had as a bowman. Provided, of course, we had first blindfolded Howard Hill and turn him around a few times so he'd have no idea as to where he was. And you kind of sit there thinking, Ziegler, you dirty dog. Of course, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How on earth, Ziegler, you know we could beat him then. How on earth could a person possibly hit a target he could not even see? You know, that's a good question. Let me give you one even better. How can you hit a target you do not even have? Have you got yours? I mean, in every phase of your life? Have you identified it and written it down? Have you specifically listed the benefits which are yours? Have you identified the obstacles which you have to overcome in order to get there? Have you put together the information you need in order to make this plan work? Have you identified the people, the groups, the organizations you need to work with in order for it to happen? Have you laid out a carefully designed game plan? Something that you cannot do in 5 minutes or in many cases in 5 hours. But have you developed a specific plan of action? Now, you know what's fascinating? Those Yale seniors, in most cases, had planned all of their life to go to Yale. Then they get there, that goal is accomplished, and they don't make the goals and the plans beyond that point. You absolutely must have the goal. You got to establish those dates. When you put all of those things together, then it's amazing how much more time you will have to work on the things that are important. It's amazing the amount of time that you will be able to save because you will be aimed at things which are important. Now, why is that important? I cannot say for the rest of the world, but in America, over 80% of all of the college graduates, 10 years after they've graduated, are working in a field which is totally unrelated to what they majored in when they were in college. What an incredible waste of time. How much further would they have been along the way had they taken those steps initially and worked through these exercises to determine literally where they were? Now, in order to wrap this unit up, to kind of pull it together, let me simply say that the first thing we've got to do is we've got to eliminate fear. Now that's easy to say, but how do you eliminate fear? You look at the alternatives. When fear deals with us, think of all the things we lose as versus when we rationalize, much as we talked about the airplane trip, you understand. There's a certain amount of danger for the plane if it leaves the ground, but it's more danger if it stays on the ground. There's a certain danger in setting goals because you might not reach them. But think of the greater danger if you don't set those goals. Rationalize it. Look at it realistically. Then buy the idea that I've been selling that you must have those goals. Then obviously you take the 7 steps that we have emphasized twice already in this unit. The steps absolutely are critical, ladies and gentlemen. You need to take them in order to set the goals which are so important to have in your life. Yes, goals are enormously important. The fourth thing we need to do is we need to really listen carefully to the Sir Edmund Hillary story. The first time Sir Edmund Hillary attempted to scale Mount Everest, he did not make it. As a matter of fact, he left, I believe it was 3 of his mountain climbers dead on the mountainside. But because his effort had been so enormous, the English government awarded him its highest honor. They called him before the Parliament. And as he walked in, to a person, everybody there rose and gave him a prolonged standing ovation. As Sir Edmund Hillary moved to the front of the room, there was a giant picture behind where he was to be standing, and the picture was that of the peak of Mount Everest. It was an awesome picture. Sir Edmund Hillary largely ignored the crowd, ignored the applause. He ignored everything that was being said by the people in the audience. He literally stood directly in front of that picture for a moment or two, and then he shook his fist at Mount Everest. And he said, "You won this time, but you're as big as you're ever going to get. I'm still growing." History tells us he made it the next go-round. Your history will record that if you persist in your goals that you're now going to set, that you'll win if you pursue those goals. By those ideas that we've been sharing, take these steps, because if you do, I'll close by saying I'll see you. And yes, I really do mean you at the top.